Tiens, on a découpé une femme en morceaux rue de la Bienséance à 2 pas du chat. Tiens, on a découpé une...
I am a feminist.
Je vous obsède avec une constance qui appelle quand même l'admiration.
D'une façon conforme à ce qu'on attend d'une jeune fille d'abord et d'une femme ensuite.
I'm sorry that I didn't become the world's first black classic pianist.
Donald Trump.
Je crois qu'une femme qui existe dans son temps, à l'intérieur de son temps, n'a pas d'époque, elle marque son époque.
Welcome to La Poudre, an intimate, in-depth conversation with inspiring women. They are artists or activists. They are creative. They're powerful. How did they become women? What books did they read? What fights did they fight? What do they scream? What do they dream? I am Lorraine Bastide, and today my guest is Sophie Fontanel.
I think I'm really... It's not androgynous. I'm in the middle of something we don't talk about. And I'm sure it concerns a lot of people.
It's always complicated to interview a friend. Sophie Fontanel is a friend. She's even more than that. She is a sister, a guide, and sometimes even a bit of a mom. We used to work together at French Elle magazine years ago, and she was the first person to allow me to grow. Sophie knows a lot about growing. That is pretty much all she talks and writes about. One of her books, Grandir, which means growing in English, is the most beautiful text ever written about aging when you're a woman and about love between a mother and her daughter. In her last book, Une apparition, an appearance in English, she tells us about how she conquered the right to let her hair grow gray. Sophie is hilarious. The 100,000s who follow her on Instagram know that. But if you're only familiar with her Clooney side, our conversation might surprise you. Sophie Fontanel is so much more than that. And I want to thank her from the bottom of my heart for trusting La Poudre with some of her most secret truths. With Sophie Fontanel, we talked about death, humor, and new porn. Sophie Fontanel, in real life, I tend to call you my Sophie. So I'm not going to address to you too formally in this podcast because it would be obvious that we're faking it. My Sophie, to prepare this, I read over tons of articles about you. I read over your books, I read over your interviews. It was weird, because I never missed any of your posts. We've known each other for 10 years, and I know a lot about your soul. However, there are parts of you that remain hidden. I have the feeling that you, of most people, know how to play with lights and shadows. You show a lot, but only what you want to. You keep control of what people see and know about you. Is it some form of writer's wisdom you've achieved?
Well, nobody ever talks to me like that because nobody ever knows me like you do. I tried to figure out what these things are that I hide because I act as if I show everything, but, well, I don't show everything. So I asked myself, what was completely hidden? I think for a long time, what was completely hidden is that I felt I did not deserve to exist. So I hid it behind humor, as people with humor often do. And I also went to therapy at one point in my life, and I told a psychiatrist that I was never desperate, which is true, I'm never desperate. But at the time I had a scooter, and I told her that from time to time, I'd tell myself that if I geared the handlebar of the scooter towards a wall, well, that would be okay. So I'm not desperate, but there is something hidden beneath that. It's like it hangs by a thread. I'm not afraid of death. I did not cry when people I loved died. I dreamt, quite a coincidence, I dreamt last night that I couldn't stop sobbing about the death of my mother and that my crying came as a surprise. It does not mean that I do not feel. It's as if, since I've had the feeling of not existing for so long, who really dies if you don't exist?
Sophie, you grew up in Paris near the metro station Muette, which means mute. That's ironic, because you love to talk.
I broke the spell.
What was it like growing up in that very posh neighborhood?
My family was upgraded, like people who miraculously get upgraded on a flight. My father was a salesman, and my mother was a housewife. Mother, rather educated. Father, not terrible on the instruction level. We end up in super posh 16th in Paris. Colleagues of my father tell him about someone who knows someone who has an apartment there. My mother embraces the cause of this posh area. She starts to talk like that, she's like that. And my father was a traveling salesman. He sold teddy bears, Zorro outfits, things like that. So in the beginning, strong sense of shame. That's what I feel from the area. Huge shame when my father comes back from tour. Some pride because he sold great stuff, but shame too because he was not a great lawyer or a cardiologist or not a banker. And that subject came up a lot. So much so that at school, when I was asked what my father did, I heard my father say he was a prisoner during the war. So I found a great thing. I said, my father is in jail, which seemed to be super classy. Well, my parents and I were summoned, and I had to say he was a sales representative.
Which was way less chic than being in jail, indeed.
No, but such memories. It's all very lucky. It gives you faith in the idea of a social ladder. I mean, in just over 2 hours, my mum had turned bourgeois. Going from a poet father to a bourgeois life, it's crazy. I also saw very young how vexing the social status could be. I learned very young that you should not offend people about their social rank. You can almost tell people that they're ugly, but you can't tell them that they're poor. I mean, for example, I had a girlfriend one day. We see a man in the street and she says to me, look at that hick, so common, so tacky. I can't remember her exact words, but he really had the typical look of a salesman. And my father was a salesman. These are crazy wounds. It gave birth to a desire for elegance. I ended up being even more bourgeois than my mother. I beat her at it.
What kind of mother was your mother during your childhood?
We had a very tight bond, almost fusion, but she never... She said if we went to the playground, playing with me was too tiresome, so she never did. Telling me stories too tiresome, all the early learning things. I've never had one of those playmats or any of that stuff. My mother didn't care whatsoever. I watched her sew, that's it, because she made herself clothes. I had a very lazy mother. Every morning she'd prepare breakfast, and by that I mean she gave me biscuits. And then she'd take me to school, and after that I think she'd go back to bed, actually. She was super lazy. She even said it herself. She cooked very well, but she hated cooking. She said all we needed is a slice of ham and a tomato, and if she really made an effort, we'd get fries and steaks. But she could really cook well. She was just too lazy. She had such a strong bond with me. Like, we were so connected. Yeah, fusion. I was a part of her. As a teenager, it was hard to separate myself from that body.
You talk about fusion, and yet you're describing a sort of distance. I kind of hear a paradox in your description of your daily life with her as a child.
I don't know where that distance comes from. Maybe a key is that my parents had very little physical contact with me. It was huge if my dad ever touched me. But it's not because he didn't want to. That was just the way it was. We did not touch each other. So my brother and I still to this day can't kiss. Or if we kiss, we get close and we go brrr. We pretend to shake as if it would be crazy to kiss, as if it was forbidden. My mother from time to time touched the skin of my arm and said it was soft. Or she would give me an occasional cuddle, but rarely. I was so aware of my mother's disgust for bodies that it kind of caused me to feel a real distance with life, actually.
You often talk about your Armenian roots, specifically in one of your books, La Vocation, The Vocation, you published in 2016. Your grandparents were forced into exile out of Armenia in 1912, escaping a genocide. Let's remember that 1,200,000 Armenians who were living in the current territory of Turkey were killed in this tragedy. Does it change a childhood to have this kind of family history?
Certainly. My father was French and my mother Armenian. She became French by getting married. Well, I say she was Armenian, but Armenians didn't have a state. They carried what was then called the Nansen passport. And in fact, the Armenian part has swallowed my whole identity. I'm proud to be French, really. I feel French. But we only spoke about the Armenians. Today I have cousins who have suddenly resurfaced, but I don't see my French family at all anymore. It's as if it doesn't exist, not because I do not like them, but the whole Armenian side took over completely. And I lived in a 2-bedroom apartment because, yes, we lived in a posh area, but there was a lot of us living in a small place. And in my room, there was my brother, occasionally one of my aunts, and my grandmother. So I had the Armenian grandmother. And so, for example, if I had forged a signature for an absence slip and my mum was screaming at me, I would go to my room to cry, and my grandmother would tell me, we say nene in Armenian to say granny, and she would say, nene has cried a lot already. And then you'd look like an idiot because her father had been hung, they'd had to leave everything, they'd lived hidden in cellars. It had taken them 4 years to be able to go from Turkey to France, to Marseille. So there was a sort of ban on crying for minor problems since there had been such huge ones. But we laughed a lot too.
You were not allowed to cry, so you laughed instead. Is that it?
My grandmother, she couldn't. From time to time, I would take her for a walk. I've done a lot of elderly care in my life. And so I would take her for a walk, and we would pass a bakery, and she'd go, the smell. She was on a diet, so she'd only eat diet fat-free yogurts, but she couldn't resist the smell of pastries. And then one day she said to me, oh, this is heaven. And she looked so peaceful that I tried to ask, what was your story in Armenia? Well, in Turkey, not Armenia. And she said, it's too sad a story. Forget it. But I regret not having insisted. Valérie Touragnon, who ran the newspapers, she questioned her grandmother. I couldn't. She didn't want to. So there are inconsistencies. We don't really understand what happened.
Valérie even wrote a book about it.
Valérie wrote a book, yes.
Some elements of your childhood recur in your books. For instance, in your family, your brother Marc was seen as the handsome one, and you were the smart one. How did your family members address to you, the smart one, when you were a kid?
Well, I made sure I was admired in my family. I think because they admired the beauty of my brother so much. And I have to go back a little here. My mother came from an Armenian family, which means something. It's people from Turkey. It's a different world. My mother got pregnant. She was 28, but within the story of my family, it's as if she was 15. And she got pregnant, and she didn't know who by. That is, she had a boyfriend who'd left her. Imagine what a scandal it was that she'd had sex with her boyfriend, but then she'd slept with another man out of spite when he'd left her. She didn't tell me until I was 25. Anyway, when she realized she was pregnant, 6 months pregnant, she told her parents. The parents said, well, there you go, okay. Which in itself, I mean, they didn't throw her out. And my brother was born. And she didn't know who my brother's father was. But there was one man she'd loved, who'd brown hair. and another man who was blonde with blue eyes and Serb. And the child was born, and as a baby, in a family of brown-haired Armenians, he strangely looked like the Serb. He had blue eyes, and their color would remain, and he had really blonde hair, white, like a little Swedish baby. So she deducted that this child was the son of this Serb. She may have been wrong, you never know, genetically, but that was her deduction, and that's how he would be identified. This child was admired for his beauty, and he came to be accepted thanks to this beauty. At first, my mother's sister put up a screen to divide the room because she didn't want to deal with a single mother. My mum was like a black sheep. But the beauty of this kid was such. Armenians often have brown hair and black eyes, so suddenly a blue-eyed blonde child was like a half god. We had a Viking in the family, so everyone was around him, and the identity of this kid became his phenomenal beauty. You look silly if you say, yeah, my sister, my brother were really beautiful, so people don't always believe me. But if I show a picture of him, they go, oh, okay, yes, because it's a Paul Newman, Clint Eastwood kind of beauty, a Hollywood beauty. And then I was born, a legitimate child. My mother had gotten married in the meantime to a man who officially recognized my brother as his own, and I was born, but everyone knew that both were my real parents, so I was seen as too spoiled since I had a dad and a mum. So they would always try to boost my brother a little bit more than me.
Because poor him.
Because poor him. And all my life I heard poor him. And not only did I hear it, but I realized as I talked to you that all the men I loved who were never ever good enough, I always loved them by telling myself, poor him.
And so you were the smart one in order to counterbalance.
Yes, I had to be double clever. I might not have been the best student, but I was really clever. At one point, they opened this big competition up as an experiment, and suddenly my class could apply, and I ended up winning. No, actually, I didn't win. I was third. I wish.
That is so you.
Yes, typically me. Yeah, I was first. No. But hey, at least in my class I was a superstar. I made sure of it. And this intelligence was not just intelligence, it was creativity. Like when I was 9 years old, I said I write poems. So I started writing poems. People thought they were good, so that when someone died, I had to write a poem about them. Well, I did it spontaneously. I wrote several poems, even made a collection of poems about the deceased. Then people would try to tell me about the person, and I would be like, no, that's confusing. Let me do it my way. But I created. So it's not surprising that today I have this weird notoriety, because my notoriety is weird. I was already famous in a weird way at school and in high school. At school events, I was with the guitar I'd been given, and I sang songs, and if the students were nice, I made a song about them.
And everyone was looking at you.
Everybody was.
Did you enjoy it?
Loved it. I wasn't afraid. I went for auditions, made some records when I was young. I was quite a phenomenon.
You easily talk about your ability to write, to play with words, about your humor as a kid. Yet, there is a part of The Art of Sleeping Alone where you find yourself as a teenager in a hotel room with a stranger that forces you into having sexual intercourse with him. You write about it in a very simple, humble way. You had brains, but you also had a very womanly body at a very young age.
Yes, that's Armenia again. That's the way with young Oriental women. I don't know if they actually hit puberty earlier, but in any case, our bodies are womanly. The completely filiform side of a girl is very quickly replaced by very opulent curves, even if I was very thin. Even if I was very thin. So when I was 13 years old, and this is why it amuses me when I'm told today that grey hair maybe ages me, when I was younger, let's say 12 and a half, people thought I was 15, and at 14 I could get into nightclubs. I looked older than my age. I did not feel beautiful at all, since it was forbidden anyway. Beauty was for my brother. But I did have a beautiful body, that I can say, with difficulty, but yes, I had a very pretty body. And at 14, I understood that this very pretty body had a power of seduction. So what do? I don't know if I was 14, 15 or 16. It was so traumatic that I forgot. It's terrible. Well, I go out without permission, of course. I go to this club, the Élysée Matignon. Of course, I tell my mother that I'm staying at a friend's place for homework, but I'm going out dancing, and I meet a boy. And the boy tells me that we have to drop by his hotel room for some reason or other. And this guy is gorgeous. We start making out, and I love it. I find all of it amazing and cool. So we go to the hotel room, and he gets half naked, half undresses me. I still think it's great, all great, but then at some point it's so great that the boy is clearly up for more. And I say, but I can't, because I'm actually very, very scared, since I'm a virgin. All that in Spanish.
Oh, that too.
And he says to me, yes, but you have to understand, you can't just leave me in that state, etc. I say, yes, but I can't. And there he tells me there is a solution. And when you're 14 like me, I was really immature when it came to all that stuff. So he goes to get a tub of moisturizer, and I think the moisturizer must be the solution. Maybe we're going to apply cream to one another, I don't know. But actually, he puts me on my stomach. He, I don't know what he does with the cream, I'll deduct that later, and he sodomizes me. And as soon as I realize that there is in fact an intrusion in my body, I start to cry. And I do not stop crying for the duration it takes, and it lasts for a while in my memory. It lasts a good while. And when it is finished, I keep crying. He tells me he's sorry. He tells me that I should not think that that was love, that this was man, when men lose their minds, and then he gives me money. And he escorts me to a taxi. And I'm in a taxi, and it's a big sum of money. And I think, but it's great to have so much money. So I stopped the taxi to keep the money. Once I was outside, I started to realize that I was bleeding and that I really was not okay. I went home and managed to keep the secret for 2 days. For 2 days, I didn't tell my mother that I was torn down there. It's horrible. It's awful. I kept the secret for 2 days, and then eventually I told my mother. She was completely devastated. She took me to a gynecologist who listened to me and who told me, I'm not going to examine you because I know what happened. And he did know. So he said, here's what to do, and that's what we're going to do. And he told me, you came across an asshole.
You were raped. No one told you.
No, but even I can't say it. Even I am not able to name it, because actually when my mother and I talked about it years later, when it happened, she hardly spoke to me about it. And when I spoke to her years later, she said it wasn't rape. A rape is when a woman is taken, pulled by the hair, and I can see what she's referring to. She said, you were abused. It's different. Someone abused your trust. Okay, so you can choose how to name it, but I always thought, okay, let's say it's not rape. Let's admit it's not rape because I was so formated, so often told that it was not rape. Let's say, okay, it's not that. It's still super violent. And there it comes down to what your whole podcast thing is about, feminism. Today at my age, what would happen if there was a young boy that I would take to a hotel room pretending to get my wallet, if I closed the door, if we started to flirt, if at some point the boy said, no, but I don't want to, I'm afraid, even if he was excited, but he just kept saying, I can't, I never made love, it's not possible, I'm too scared. What would happen if I told him that there was a solution, if I went to get a can of deodorant, some moisturizer, and I shoved it up his ass? I mean, it's completely crazy.
Well, it would be rape too.
Exactly.
Maybe that boy would press charges.
Maybe. I asked my parents at the time why we didn't file a complaint, and my parents said there were two things. One, how would you explain to the police that you were willing up to a certain extent, but not to another? That's what I said. And that secondly, the boy couldn't be feeling that guilty because he actually called back one night. My father told him he was going too late. The worst of all is that maybe in Mexico, he was Mexican, there is a guy who cannot imagine for a single second that he screwed up my life, because the reality is that this man fully ruined my sex life.
Were you born a woman, or did you rather become one?
I think I became one. And I became one firstly because I was told that I was a woman. That's the first thing. I was told that I was a girl. And then because I decided to be one. Because when I was a kid, I had a boyish haircut. I looked like one of those boyish heroines from movies of the 60s. Girls often had short haircuts then. I had male friends, and I felt exactly as boyish as they were. And I was very surprised that we had to sit down to pee. I thought we could maybe pee standing up. I tried, but it didn't work.
Well, of course you had to try.
I had to try. And I became a girl because I decided it was actually pretty okay. Among the childhood friends I grew up with were two boys. And there was complete equality. There was no girl or boy, except when we went bike riding. They tried to convince me they were faster than me, but since I was really fast, they would deflate the tires of my bike, so I couldn't catch up with them. Anyway, we also played putting our hand in each other's panties, that kind of stuff. And when I discovered how cool that was, I thought, it's actually fantastic to be a girl. I could see they were actually attracted to me because I was a girl, and I kind of liked them being boys. And all that felt a little transgressive. And that's it. That's how I became a woman.
Do you remember what you used to read when you were a teenager, when you were a 16-year-old?
My mother used to read poems out loud, some of which I still know by heart, actually. So she'd read first verses, Molière, very often Prévert, Musset. And so I started to write poems. From poetry, I went to song, and at about 9.5, I said I want a guitar. I wanted a piano, but it was too expensive, so I was given a guitar.
Plus, the apartment wasn't big enough.
Yes, I had a pretty rich grandmother that we went to see, and she had been an operetta singer, and so she made me sing to decide if she'd buy me a piano. She said that she did not like it, so she would buy me a guitar.
Which is good enough already.
Yeah, I wrote songs on the guitar, and since it was before this sexual assault, I told stories. I had a song that went, "Doctor, find me a problem, doctor, find a mistake, there are too many people who love me." My mother loved this song because it meant she had been so successful in her education that I had no problem. And then, as soon as that thing happened, which was a little traumatic, to say the least, I wrote songs that say who I am today. There was one that went, I protect myself with laughter, noise and lies. I'm so scared of annihilating myself when a man lays me down. The atmosphere was given.
I saw a picture of you taken in New York when you were 20 years old. You had very short hair, and your hair was still brown. Commenting on that picture, you say, "I wanted to look like Elvis Presley and Audrey Hepburn." Yet again, it's an interesting way to play with gender.
Yes, I have always identified with both. And for example, when I saw James Bond, just like many other women, I identified with James Bond. Now a little more with the girl, but then with James Bond. When I read The Famous Five, I was a boy, Claude, I think. because the boys had the strength and freedom. I liked that. And I remember when video games started, Lara Croft and all that, I'd gone to see a video game company and I told them a video game needs to be created with a female heroine who can vanquish by discussion, by arguments, who manages to overcome everything, who flirts with men. And they said, no, to be a superhero, she would have to have something of the strength of a man. So where is the strength of a woman? I personally found a lot of it through Elvis Presley somehow. And in fact, I always thought that if I met Elvis Presley, he would completely fall for me. Big mistake. I thought he'd fall in love with me because he would know that he'd met his equal. Already a huge megalomania delusion. But this kind of thinking is exactly what explains my complete failure at seduction. When I meet a man, I never, ever pretend to be this little fragile thing that needs protecting. Even if I am, of course, also that little fragile little thing that needs protecting.
But no one can tell.
No. And when I try to be that, it's a disaster because I suddenly allow myself to appear so fragile that it attracts sadist freaks. So it doesn't work. I can't find the right balance.
And then you became a journalist. You were 22 when the daily newspaper Au Matin de Paris hires you. I'm going to fast forward a little because I want to get to the women's magazine. First, you worked at Cosmopolitan. It was huge at that time.
That was very funny.
It was funny.
We made funny titles like Caught in the Middle of Two Men, I am happy, but I'm bored, I left my man, but he doesn't know.
And after that, Elle magazine. I got to say it's a special way to be a journalist, being a women's magazine journalist. The whole concept of women's magazine is weird when you think about it.
Yes, I never saw myself as a journalist.
Is that true?
I was delighted. Because it gave me the press card.
Free museum.
For a free museum, but I never felt like a journalist. I did some investigations, but I hated being asked to investigate. When I was recruited by this famous French weekly called L'Obs, The Observer, they tried to make me investigate, but they immediately figured out it wasn't for me. I like to observe, so even before joining The Observer, I wanted to create a female part of their magazines that would be called The Female Observer.
Which makes sense.
Because that's how I feel. I look at things in a very special way because I live in a wobbly way. And because my life is wobbly, I can see very, very clearly in others. I see other angles. I'm never totally stable.
And you see many women. How much time did you spend there? 15 years at Elle?
Oui, mais alors, quand j'étais à Elle, parce qu'il y a une fille l'autre jour qui m'a mis un commentaire.
Yes, Elle. A girl the other day commented on my Instagram feed that she felt I maybe had to redeem myself because she thought I'd given all these beauty injunctions to women, etc. But she's wrong. I never praised these beauty injunctions. I'm not going to reply to her that she's wrong. There's no point with people who hate you like that. But no, when I arrived at Elle magazine, I invented this character for my column called Fontanel, a girl who didn't need a man or children, a free thinker. For example, same-sex marriage. Obviously, I'm for it. If people want to get married, I don't see why we'd stop them. But there is a New York Times drawing I love with an old couple watching TV, and one of them says, homosexuals are going to get married, and the other one says, as if they hadn't suffered enough. I digress, but I mean, I hate the norm. I was in a women's magazine, but I was happy because I came there to show something other than the norm.
C'est quand même un endroit où But still, this magazine is all about telling women what they should be. You mentioned Fontanel. I really wanted to get there. Fontanel was kind of a doppelganger you created. She still appears on your Instagram feed from time to time as if you had trouble pulling away from her. She was trendy, kinky, and fun, a tad obsessed by fashion too. Why did you come up with Fontanel in the first place?
Elle servait à quoi, en fait, Fontanel? Elle venait jouer quel rôle dans ta vie?
Fontanel had something I usually hide in myself. She was kind of badass. I always wonder where my softness and my strengths are. Fontanel didn't ponder on that. Fontanel was only strength. I liked that it was only strength, which is interesting. At some point, I met with some producer to write a movie from my Fontanel column. I remember that I'd started working on a script. Well, I was told it's not possible because she's too strong. You have to give her weaknesses. And I thought, damn, James Bond isn't given weaknesses. Well, in the last one they did, but it was the end of the world. Take Brise de Nice, played by Jean Dujardin. He's a monolithic block. Why do you need to give them weaknesses? I was told, you see, maybe her parents separated when she was young and it affected her, or maybe she got sexually assaulted. I thought, there's a form of clairvoyance. But Fontanel was healing precisely that wound, all strengths. She has an answer to everything. And the problem I have is that Fontanel is actually asleep within me. But if I go on a date, who wakes up? Fontanel, of course. So it's funny, really. I'm actually looking for a man I can play with, someone I can throw the ball at and who will catch it and throw it back. But the problem is I sometimes send it right into his eye.
You can't help it. Humor is your way of making your intelligence a bit more acceptable by society.
Humor is, it's maybe. Someone said to me once, you seem to think you are very intelligent. Well, yes, it's just the way it is. I am. But I do pay the price. So it's not that easy. But humor is mostly a way to not to, I was going to say, not to hold on. It's a way of avoiding all tensions. I read a text by Freud on humor. There are many others on the subject. And I learned that humor is pleasure, enjoyment, given to the other. And so that it's a derivative from sexual pleasure. Seems to fit with me.
It is generous. You are a giver.
Making someone laugh is like making them come. I always go to humor. I don't know how else to be.
I know. What about celebrity? In the 90s, you were a commentator for a very famous French TV show on Canal+. People stopped you on the street. You wrote a book about it. I personally read it before starting working at Canal+ too. And it's still happening. People stop you on the street because they know you from your Instagram. They tell you about their life, they relate to you, they identify to you, they want to be you, they love you. What role do these people have in your life? Is this some kind of family?
Quelle fonction ils jouent en fait ces gens dans ta vie? Est-ce que c'est une espèce de famille? Est-ce que c'est
Non, c'est pas une famille.
No, it's not a family.
C'est pas une famille.
It's not a family. It's just.
C'est mon lien.
It's my link to the world.
C'est plus large qu'une famille.
It's wider than a family, and in a family there are also annoyances. Here too, I mean, sometimes people snap at you because, in fact, there is also a form of love involved. So sometimes someone will say something, I don't know, actually, I want your body, or whatever. Once a woman wrote, and this happened a couple of times, a woman wrote some really homophobic hints, like, but admit it, admit that you actually like pussies, that kind of thing. All as a public comment on Instagram. One day she wrote, hey, big dyke, something like that. I can't remember which word she used, but it was homophobic. And one day, I threw it back at her, something I'd never do, and I don't know why I reacted that way. Not that I'm secretly gay deep down and that she'd hit a nerve. That's not it. I have always very strongly fought homophobic remarks. Not on my space. She's free to go and write whatever she wants on her own blog, not on mine. I love man, but it's hard for me to go towards them. It is not easy for me at all. I am not sexually attracted to women, so I guess I am elsewhere. Neither am I this girl who from time to time thinks a man will be able to give me pleasure. It's difficult for me. And I wish I could be attracted to women. I know a lot of incredible ones, but I'm not attracted to them. So I'm in the middle, somewhere with no label, no name. I think I'm really, it's not androgynous. I'm in the middle of something we don't talk about. And I'm sure it concerns a lot of people. So, for example, if I dream that all of a sudden, if I get excited, you know, I think you can know your sexual preferences when you go on YouPorn. And in fact, I can see it. I had a whole young old phase because for a long time I felt like a kid, and when for older man I'd watch videos with gross old men, etc. And I know that's not my thing anymore. At one point I was into spanking videos. I like that stuff. Well, it's very complicated when you're self-eroticizing to give yourself a spanking. Well, I was trying things, but it turns out I can't seem to find what really suits me. But I never search lesbian porn on YouPorn. I mean, at some point when you keep failing with men, you think, maybe I'm a lesbian, and I don't know. Some girl said to me, how do you know if you haven't tried? But even without really trying, I've seen some women try.
Some women flirt with you.
Very often, very often. And then I went on a holiday with a girlfriend who knew I was always single, and one day she climbed on top of me and she tried. It happened to me already when I was about 11. She tried to kiss me, and I remember she tried once, a second time. She was laughing, but at the third time, I grabbed her by the shoulder, looked her square in the eyes, and said, "What do you want?" And she got scared because she was no more lesbian than me. She just wanted to understand what I was about. It's weird to be in the middle, but that's where I am.
It's funny. I ask you to tell me about your community and you end up talking about this. It's like you're looking at yourself through some kind of mirror.
No, I'm trying to say something, but I keep getting sidetracked. I mean that because my sexual life is almost non-existent, my connection with others, my erotic connection, is the way I shine in the eyes of the others. Inside the others. That's my thing.
You make them come by making them laugh.
Probably, yes, and by moving them too. What's crazy is that they understand. They understand it, and I still dream, just like a teenager, that there is room for a man, but I call him the invisible man. I just realized now this second that my next book is going to be called The Invisible Man.
What?
I know, crazy. It will all have started here, because actually, I kept space for this man who isn't there. And these women who follow me, they understand, they know. They often write to me about my loneliness. They know I'm lonely. They know my loneliness is not a sad one, because I don't really want to gear my scooter towards the wall, not anymore. But they know... they have completely understood, even the ones who haven't read my books. Sometimes people argue over whether I'm a writer or not, critics, who debate, etc. Well, all you need to do to get the answer is read my books. That's all I can say.
Well, precisely. I wanted us to get to The Art of Sleeping Alone, that memoir you wrote in 2011. It recounts 12 years of your life without having sex ever. That book was a huge success. You even had a story about it in the New York Times. The article described it as a searching investigation into the power of no. And that doesn't make you a feminist.
No, but you know I am a feminist. The problem is that I'm also, most of the time, abstinent. I'm single. I am in my 50s. I'm an influencer. I'm all sort of things. And I hate to say it. I hate to say it because what matters is not what you say you are, but what you do, and never to be ashamed of it. So I don't need to say that I'm a feminist, although actually I just wrote this book about letting your hair go grey, and I get so many attacks. Sometimes I tell myself they're going to force me to openly talk about feminism. It's so exasperating.
You'll take a banner soon.
It's so infuriating. I think there's such huge prejudice in our society, but anyone who knows me knows where I stand. I'm just not an activist, that's all.
Now I would like us to talk about Grandir, growing. Because growing, to me, is the most beautiful of your books, maybe the most beautiful of all of your writings. I'm feeling emotional.
You got me on the verge of tears twice already.
I'm sorry, this interview is very intense indeed. The book recounts the years you took care of your old and sick mother until she died. It was a time where we used to see each other a lot. I know what you went through. I would love you to read 2 pages from it. Is it okay?
Yeah. Where is it?
Page 51.
This and that?
Yeah, this and that.
Page 51. I have developed a peculiar sensitivity for the elderly. Is it an asset? Does it open me to supplemental values, this brand new magnifying glass that allows me to see the end? If my eye catches a jolty one in the streets, that's it. Nothing can divert my attention from it, neither the irresistible store display nor the celebrity that would materialize right before my eyes. I am like those parents who, knowing a child's fundamental needs, are astonished to see other children run between the tables of the bar, far from being asleep at 2 a.m, edgy and pale. Like them, I think, what the hell is he doing here? He is not in his place. What is she doing here, this lady stole to her trolley who came by late to the market that is packing up already, clawing back to the discarded fruits and vegetables on the ground? She would bend until she breaks for a burst melon. What is she doing here, this microscopic passerby, overtaken at great speed by a scooter? She panics, pants on her stick, while the mother of the child, the one riding the scooter so busy, yells, "Don't go so fast, you're going to fall." The mother doesn't even notice what her child threatens. What is she doing here? The one laying in front of me at the emergency room, ageless, blemished, rough. It is Iceland's soil. She didn't want to bother her family in Ferret, and she is waiting alone on the stretcher, her bag laid against her pubis, and she hands it out to the nursing staff that is taking care of her. Everything is in there. What is she doing here, my neighbour, whom I found on my way out one day at noon on the ground, turned over like a ladybird? An inappropriate yet heart-rending excess of politeness prevents her from admitting her arm makes her suffer. It is broken. What is she doing here, this other one, in the middle of the crossroad, blocking 5 road arteries? The bus stopped right in front of her in an inexplicable and doomed confrontation. What is she doing there, the overly made-up antediluvian, at the Moroccan restaurant on Monsieur le Prince Street, always solitary, always the same, talking to an imaginary friend surrounded by customers who, in their whole lives, never ever saw that significant other when she can see him? Wow. It's really hard to read oneself.
It's so good. But this endearment you have for old women are really looked at, filmed or written about. And you do that with such softness. You probably drew that from a moment of life many women experience but rarely talk about. The moment when you have to take care of your parents. That's a job that often falls to women. This part of your life really was a turning point for you.
Well, I had to forgive my mother. My mother is not guilty that I ended up getting sodomized in a hotel room. She's not guilty of that. But her lack of communication and understanding, which comes from many things, the fact I was never taken to see a shrink, the fact that it was as if nothing had happened, or much worse, that I had kind of asked for it. So all of that, it made me, when I was in front of my mother, she knew it. But then one day my mother fell, and suddenly I had to forgive all in 2 hours, because otherwise this woman who was on the ground and who had to be taken to the emergency room would have refused to move. I had to tell her, Mum, I love you, and because I love you, I'm going to call an ambulance. But I thought, I'm crazy, and what am I thinking? And I thought of Jean Marais, who told the story of how in a hotel room, Jean Cocteau once came to see him and said, you are so handsome, and he took him in his arms, and they were not lovers, and he said to him, I love you, do you love me? And Jean Marais said, yes, I love you too. And in Une Vie, his book, he says, I was not at all in love with Jean Cocteau, but I told him that as an exercise to practice saying it, because I knew I was going to have to say it a lot because it was Jean Cocteau. Well, I practiced saying I love you to my mother when actually deep down I wanted to say, but how? How could you not see everything that happened to me? Because all my life she told me, but how come you're alone? How come? And that was not her fault either, but it was all connected.
On parle pas souvent du moment où les femmes vieillissent. On parle pas souvent des cheveux blancs. On parle pas souvent.
Women growing older are not often talked about. Grey hair is not often talked about. Sexual abstinence is not often talked about. To me, the fact that you keep shining lights on subjects that are silenced, even though they're part of women's life and not men's, really is an activist move. I think you really did something that made women's cause move forward by delivering a gendered storytelling of your own experience.
En apportant un récit genré de ta propre expérience.
Yes, it's clear that men and women are not considered in the same way. And I see how women accept. To accept the difference is not a problem, but to be disregarded. Because why exactly do we think that George Clooney is hot and sexy with his grey hair? And when I write a book about my grey hair, I'm told it's not a subject for a book. It's on the bestsellers list, for God's sake. Clearly not a subject for a book, hey? And then people tell me, no, sorry, but women look better without their grey hair. So in fact, there is an inequality. The woman is diminished. That's it, diminished. And there is an attempt to silence any woman who actually doesn't want to be diminished. But it's hard to achieve in my case, and some other women too, thank God. Okay, watch out. I'm going to say something that is really not PC, but even deciding how old one is allowed to have sex, the legal age of consent, I find even that a problem. So I know that people are going to say, what, but you have to protect children, etc. But me, I had stories before what happened to me. I had stories when I was young, erotic stories. I had this eroticism. It depends on people and it depends on each person. At 11, I personally was already able to do a lot of things. That was not penetration. And in my head, I was far from being an innocent young thing at the time. That's why my mother thought I'd ask for it. They say it starts at such age. In my opinion, it starts well before. Then it stops quite fast. And that's another subject. But when it stops, let me tell you this story about Dr. René Friedman. He's an amazing guy.
He's a gynecologist who helps women get pregnant.
Yes, a total hero. He said the other day on this radio show on France Culture, wonderful radio station, he said, well, nothing can be done. From 36 years old, a woman's fertility decreases dramatically, which is true, especially when trying for a first child, hardly achievable without help. And he spoke of it as a terrible doom. But fuck, I told you that my mother had become pregnant at a young age. I thought that the problem for women was that they could get pregnant very easily. That seems to be the bigger problem. Before not being able to have children anymore, accidental pregnancy is the biggest potential problem, isn't it? So I hear that a woman could potentially be freed from the maternity when 36 years old. Obviously, some do want children, of course, but the other ones will be delivered of that and able to fuck with peace of mind. It seems absurd to me.
It's actually good news.
It is good news, and I don't get it. So that's the injunction for women. And what about men? Renee Friedman continues, it isn't fair, but men can procreate until 90 years old. But who wants to see a 90-year-old man procreate? And what's the other message here? And I say all this with all due respect because I truly appreciate Renee Friedman. He's saying that men over 50 who suffer from erectile dysfunction are not allowed to because they're supposed to get erections until they're 90. Believe me, girl, I haven't had many sexual experiences, but I know what erectile dysfunction is. I know it's not my fault, and I know it does happen. It happens earlier than you think. So you see, we're putting men in an injunction and women in another. We shorten women's lives. To sum up, a woman has a right to live between 16 and 34. And then what? We put her down?
I got a good story. A few days ago, Laurent Wauquiez, a conservative French politician, confessed he whitened his hair to be taken more seriously. Those double standards are mind-blowing. A 40-year-old politician woman going grey would have to hide it to the world. For a Jew, it's the total opposite. A woman has to freeze at that moment of life when she's fertile, actually a very short period of time. Whereas for men, the older they grow, the more reassuring they look.
Ils sont supposément attirants, sécurisants.
Mais je trouve qu'en plus, si les cheveux blancs, c'est la sagesse, tu vois, puisque ce Wauquiez...
I think that if grey hair makes you look wiser, that politician clearly thought so. If grey hair is wisdom, making love to someone wise isn't too bad. One can be wise and flirty and nasty and many more things. But someone wise is not going to kill you. Someone wise wants your well-being. And I think it's important. And the fact it's not valued is absurd. And it comes from the fact that what a woman is supposed to be. In fact, every time you think a woman is experienced sexually, it's always to dominate her. But a woman who knows her sexual body, a woman who can teach, who can explain to a man to go a little slower, who can explain a number of things, when to talk, when not to talk, a woman who knows all that is a gold mine. But instead she'll be disgraced because we prefer the image of the man who tells her what he wants.
We want the little fragile thing.
The little fragile thing.
Dans une apparition dans ton dernier roman, donc celui où tu racontes.
So in an appearance, your last book, at some point you run across a friend, the same friend that told you 25 years ago to start dyeing your hair, and you tell her, I disobeyed. Disobeying is political, don't you think?
Oui.
Yes.
Et les femmes... Même celles qui croient qu'elles désobéissent.
It is crazy how even women who believe that they are disobedient or free are actually obedient. I know so many women who think they are independent and emancipated, but then take this friend of mine. We're in a shop and she goes, no, you can't buy that. You will never catch a man with that. First off, to catch a man, they don't mean that. They think they'll get caught. Getting caught or doing the catching, I don't mind as long as you can do both. But women say things like that. Recently, I got a text from a man and I replied. This man then gives me no news, and this girlfriend of mine says to me, what an asshole. I still send another very tender text, and this woman suddenly has a go at me for being emasculating. That I'm castrating him with my kindness and the fact I never sanction him because it gives no momentum. And I thought, what does she know about it? Maybe she's right and maybe she isn't. When I went to therapy, I remember saying to the shrink, I can't figure out what this guy thinks. And she said to me, could anyone imagine everything you're telling me here?
So here comes the ritual question of la poudre, but you already kind of answered it. How do you get along with your uterus?
I know you asked this question, and I was dreading it.
I'm sorry, I have to.
I was dreading it because I answered that question when I was young. I put a finger up there, I pushed and pushed with a finger and felt a wall.
What, in your uterus?
Well, I ended up in my uterine cervix.
Oh my God, you're literally telling me that?
Yeah.
All right, okay. It was not just an image. You paid him a little visit.
No, you just put your finger.
Gynecologist.
That's what the doctor does. The gynecologist does the same when you go there. So you touch until the cervix. So I reached my cervix. I experimented. did. I checked it out, and then after I went to see what it looked like. That's it. I understood. And I thought everyone did that. And in fact, I see talking to you that not everyone does. And one day I was with some girlfriends at home and we were discussing dick sizes, and one of them says, yes, but it depends on how big your vagina is. And I say, no, it's elastic. It stretches with desire. And she's like, no. Imagine if all of a sudden it hurts your stomach. She's crazy. So I go, listen, girls, I mean, these are adult women. I say, girls, it's not a pipe. It's not the Mont Blanc tunnel. I mean, it's not a pipe that reaches the esophagus. At a certain point, there is no way forward. And all of them, oh no, well, I was making it up. I had a problem. Women don't know their bodies. My relationship with my uterus is that I at least paid it a visit once.
That's great. Congratulations. Your room of one's own in Virginia Woolf's sense. I know you have it. Does it feel good?
Yes. Well, I do have a room of my own. I have it so much, so totally, that sometimes... You see, last year I fell in love and I thought, I'm going to share my room. I imagined it would be fantastic. He was older than me and I thought, he'll be here, he'll be in my bed. He's going to snore, I'm sure of it. He's going to bother me, but it's going to be great. My apartment doesn't have any doors, as you know, so it's all in one, the office, the dining room, everything is in one space. So I thought, well, here I am. I'll share it. I can. I think I can.
What do you read when the world gets too ugly?
I don't even need to read. I need to hear from time to time. That's why I love the public broadcast radio so much. From time to time, there's this whole thing and someone who says, as Paul Éluard said, you are the great sun that makes me drunk when I'm sure of me. And all of a sudden, you hear literature and poetry. You hear that. And then that's why I'm grateful I read my text, because all of a sudden you hear and you do not need a critic to tell you it's literature. You hear that it is, you see. And I just need a sentence.
What does la poudre mean for you?
It means the smell of violets. I don't wear much makeup, but I wear powder. It means age and femininity. We come back to it. I don't know if powder still smells of violets now. I'm often sad because it won't smell the way I want it to smell.
Thank you, my Sophie.
Thank you.
Thank you to Sophie Fontanel for speaking up in La Poudre. Nouvelles Écoutes is the executive producer of La Poudre, a podcast produced by Aurore Meyer-Mailleux, prepared and recorded by Zisla Tortello, and mixed by Laurie Galigani. The English dubbing is made by l'Arrière-Boutique Studio. The signature tune is an audio sample from the song L'Appétit by Bonnie Banane. If you like the podcast, bless it with stars, preferably 5 of them, on Apple Podcasts. You can join us on social media. La Poudre is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can also follow me on my social media. I go by Lorraine Bastide, and I post in English on Instagram. If you want to hear about other exciting podcasts produced by Nouvelles Écoutes, please visit our website, where you can also subscribe to La Poudre newsletter. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. This episode of La Poudre was recorded in a room of the Hôtel Grand Amour, one of the coziest, sexiest, and coolest hotels in Paris. I cannot thank them enough for their ongoing support starting right from La Poudre's very first season. If you book a room with the code La Poudre at the Hôtel Grand Amour, you'll get a 10% reduction on your reservation. You're welcome.